In this video, we're going to be talking all about game design. So what is game design? Well, game design involves planning the overall structure, mechanics and systems of a game, including how it plays, its goals, rules and the player experience. Let's break this down into its basics so we can get a loose framework or structure to work through, and we'll split this into two parts: concept development and game design. Brainstorm the core idea. This is where you decide on the type of game you want to make. Will it be an action game, a strategy game, or maybe a puzzle game, or even something entirely unique? Most of all, you want to be excited about getting started. Market research. Now this is a crucial step to determine if people will actually want to play your game. Are there any examples that you can see? Are there any successful games that you can get data on to support this? We have a great feature in HypeHype to do just that. Game scope. What are the constraints you are going to enforce on your game initially? We'll cover this in more in a later video, but essentially you'll want to consider your time frame and your expertise here. Defining the player experience. Think about how you want the player to feel while playing. Do you want them to be excited or potentially generate some tension like in a horror game? Do you want them to roam freely and lean into exploration? Or perhaps spark their creativity in a sandbox style game? What experience and emotions do you want the player to have? As I just mentioned, typically in horror games you'll want to instill some emotions of fear, anxiety, tension, perhaps even some jump scares. Other games such as Trial Zombie create excitement with the thrill of finishing each level, whereas the game Dominoes with Friends has a much more cosy and relaxed feel. So let's go through some of the main elements that make up the core game design structure. First up is your game's core loop, and this is the series or chain of actions that is repeated over and over as the primary flow of your player's experience. This can arguably be one of the most important parts of your game, as without a hooky, fun and addicting core loop, people simply won't want to play. Your core game loop should typically be short and be able to be completed in a quick session, and it needs to be simple and easy to instantly understand within the first 3 to 5 seconds. Game core mechanics. These are the essential actions a player will perform within your game. These can be things like jumping, running, shooting, exploring, etc. You also have secondary mechanics, which are the additional systems that support these mechanics. This could be things like inventory system, crafting or leveling up. Then we have game rules, objectives and goals. These are the fundamental elements that define how the game is played, won and lost. We'll go into this in more details in another video. Game flow and progression. This is how you design the game systems and how the gameplay progresses. Is it level based, open world or a sandbox game? Will there be increasing difficulty as you progress? Now this progression and rhythm of the player's experience throughout a game will determine how smoothly and logically a player moves from one action, challenge, event to the next. To ensure there's a balanced and enjoyable gameplay experience, your game flow is crucial in keeping players engaged, offering just the right amount of challenge and downtime, along with guiding them through the game without confusion or frustration. Theme and environment. This is the world, situation, theme and environment that your game will take place in. Storyline and narrative. When we're thinking about casual mobile games in particular, it's very common not to have any deep storyline or narrative in our games. Often due to their casual nature, they are short experiences, and unless you are specifically creating a narrative or storyline game, some environmental storytelling for context is typically more than enough. And this can also be a really powerful driver for retention. Art and aesthetics. This is what will be the look, feel and vibe of your game. It's super important regardless of style to match the genre or type of game that you're creating. Horror style games are often dark and moody, so using a bright colour palette and the cutest of kittens here might not be the way to go. And that leads us into sound and music. So just like art and aesthetics and the player experience, your game or background music, if you have any at all, will need to support the experience you're aiming for. To illustrate this more, let's just see how important and how much impact music can have on your game's feel and the atmosphere. Of course, you'll also want to add sound effects too to reinforce any actions in your game to provide feedback to the players. We have a vast library available inside HypeHype, so be sure not to neglect this. It's right at your fingertips. And last on our list is the monetization. Can you have any items in your game that players can purchase? Can you have any boosts, special characters or skins? The economy in your game can be a great way to do this. Allow for perks, customization and even locked areas within your game that the player must pay to use. This is the backbone of free-to-play games. In-app purchases for in-game currency is a fantastic way to allow players to speed up their progress without spoiling the experience. Of course, you need to balance this correctly. There will be players that are happy to grind for items and upgrades, whilst others will prefer just to fast track and pay a little bit of HypeX to speed things up. So those are the main elements and disciplines that go into game design. Each one of those can be split into many sub-factors as well, and that's well outside the scope of this video, but I hope that gives you a good starting point to revert back to and hopefully consider when planning your next game. As always, if you've got any comments, please leave them below, and I will see you on the next video.